Yeah, what are your thoughts, Tristan? Are you gonna play the wizard game?
It's from the looks of it, it was a game that I wouldn't have bought anyway because it did not look like a good game. And I don't play that many video games in the first place. And the ones I do play have like entire wikis about them because I play weird games that people who like spreadsheets play.
They gotta be good.
But I was kind of taken aback by when a group of marginalized people who would be actively harmed by the popularity of this game politely asked people to not play said game.
They said, please don't play it.
When they came for video games, people had an absolute fit. And I'm blown away by the reaction. Like, to me, I'm like, okay, it's like one video game. Don't play that one. Yeah. And it doesn't even look that good anyway.
Don't play that one.
But everyone was like, no, it is like a human rights violation for me not to be able to play this video game.
I need to play this game. It is actually illegal for you to stop me from playing this game, actually.
The wildest thing about it, too, is that you could have just, like, nobody would have known if you had just bought the game and just didn't tell anybody about it. If you just played it in the privacy of your own home, but they need, like, the moral permission to play the wizard game.
They just don't want to be bullied. That's the thing. I've seen a lot of people say, like, well, the main reason people aren't playing this are like saying they don't want to play this game is because they fear being bullied if they play it and buy it. To which I would say, number one, you know, you could just do the thing that you said, Tristan, where it's like, if you really, really have to play it, you don't have to. You don't have to say anything. You won't get bullied if people don't know.
But you have to be able to play it and tell everybody that you are playing it.
Yeah, it feels like a requirement of this game at this point that, like, if you bought it and played it and are playing it, you have to. Like, it's in the terms and conditions of the game.
Yeah, when you log in for the first time,
they will tweet on your behalf. Yeah.
When you log in for the first time, it opens up Twitter and you have to follow J.K. Rowling and like a turf tweet before you can, like, log in.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before. Harry Potter was not a part of my life at all growing up. It was a big part of my life for a couple years for reasons, but not by choice, you know? And so even if this game was good, there are so many other good games that I have yet to play that are just sitting, that I've already purchased, that are just sitting on my Switch, that I'm just like, I'll get to these eventually. And now I can, maybe. I mean, I probably won't. I don't play video games very often in general. I got a video game for Christmas, and I don't know when I'm going to play that game. So
fun.
We'll see. Is that cat game, Stray?
See, the thing is that Harry Potter was a huge part of my childhood because I was the exact age that it was designed for. Like, I think they came out like almost when I was like the exact age for every single book or whatever. But either way, I also grew up and realized that, you know, not everything from childhood. I don't want to like go super deep and like get like all soapboxy about it, but like,
okay, yeah.
We're like, what's it called? Millennials, like, I mean, it's probably everybody, but like, we do need to at some point realize that even though objectively, because of all the financial crisis and everything like that, our adult life is actively worse than our childhood was, but we do need to get over our obsession with nostalgia and maybe embrace new things or things that are different, because we seem weirdly obsessed with things from our childhood, and maybe we should not do that because it's letting us do stuff like support a bigoted author because we feel like it is our human right to play a video game.
Yeah. For full disclosure, I am wearing a Crypto the Superdog shirt today that looks very much like the cartoon that came out when I was younger. So I'm taking this attack on nostalgia pretty personally right now, Tristan, just FYI.
This is why The Last Jedi is the best Star Wars movie, because it's a Star Wars movie that is actively about why nostalgia is bad.
Look at it with your adult mind. Things weren't as good as you always thought they were. No, I don't play the wizard game. Yeah. Everyone, don't play the wizard game. Why are we even talking about the wizard game?
Because it's the thing to talk about right now. But
it's the thing to talk about. And
Order of the Phoenix Lights. It's probably not aliens.
There's a Phoenix. See, we could have talked about X-Men, but instead we decided to talk about transphobic wizards. And here we are. Don't play the wizard game. And also, how do phoenixes tie in with aliens? That's a question that we're going to answer on this podcast. Hi, everyone. This is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens, where every week we look into ancient astronaut theory and UFO conspiracies, and we debunk them or really just look into them. People have been accusing us of having a bias of debunking stuff. We're looking into stuff. We're looking into it. Mm-hmm. And along the way, we're going to learn a lot about some fun history of real life people, places, things, events. My name is Scott Nicewander. I'm one of the hosts, specifically the one that doesn't know anything. I know nothing. Except of my very strong opinions that you shouldn't play the wizard game. That's just me, though.
My name's Tristan Johnson, and also I believe that you should probably not play the wizard game. But I'm the person who does the Googling in preamble to our shows, where we talk about ancient astronaut, ancient aliens, UFOs, and all that kind of stuff. We're kind of on a UFO streak this past few episodes, where we're kind of talking about more contemporary UFO stuff, mostly because I think we are sort of roughly going through the show Ancient Aliens, which is sort of the main thrust of this show right now. We are going through an episode that doubled down on UFOs and close encounters and that kind of thing. So we're sort of in that vein, but I think we are at the end of it in this one episode.
If Ancient Aliens, if the show Ancient Aliens can talk about modern alien sightings, then so can we. I mean, our podcast is it's just called It's Probably Not Aliens. We can talk about aliens in any capacity. We can talk about things that aren't aliens. We can talk about whatever we want.
We can talk about, as we've established in the first 10 minutes of basically every episode we've done. But this time we are going into history because in about 4 years, the event that we're talking about today will be 30 years old.
Oh.
Because we're going back in time far, far away to the year 1997.
Ooh. 1997 was the year that a young James Cameron had a hit movie called Titanic.
Titan 1C.
Titan 1C. And now, look how things have changed. He has another hit movie about water.
I stole that joke.
Out right now.
I stole that joke. I just want everyone to know. That was a reference to Cug on Earth, or it's a good show. Anyways, I stole a joke and I felt bad about not citing it.
Oh, that's okay. I forgive you.
But yeah, we're going to talk about a different James Cameron project in the late 90s, which was a UFO sighting. So Scott, we've talked a lot about UFOs and different sorts of cases, but one of the ones that we haven't talked about is sort of the holy grail. Every time people talk about and try to make the claim that UFOs are definitely spaceships and they're definitely real, the number one case that comes up is what we're going to talk about today, which is basically the most widely cited UFO sighting possibly in history. This is an event that thousands of people saw. There are pictures, there are videos. It is one of the most documented UFO events ever.
Okay, it's weird that I've not heard of this then.
Mm-hmm. And what this is that in 1997, over the states of Arizona and Nevada, I think that's how you say it, were
Nevada.
A bunch of sightings of very strange flying objects, specifically over the cities of Phoenix and Tucson. Or sorry.
Wait, then how come these aren't called the Tucson lights?
Because I think Phoenix is the bigger city, and I think it had the bigger event.
All right.
So here's the basic idea, is that thousands of people between the times of 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. in a sort of 480 kilometer or 300 mile stretch from the sort of through Phoenix and to the border with Nevada, there was this image of lights. Specifically,
I'm looking at it.
Specifically, they saw what's a V-shaped object traveling southeast at 8:15.
Yes. It's like if the Mighty Ducks did the famous flying V, but they were actually flying, and they also were balls of light.
Exactly.
That's what it looks like. That's what I Googled images of it. Yeah, very eerie looking.
But the problem is that the Mighty Ducks were all the way in Anaheim, so they wouldn't have been able to make it in time.
I don't think that's not true of the movie, though. I don't think. Maybe it is. Who knows? We'll never know. Continue.
Yeah, both of us deep experts on in the NHL and movies, as we know.
Yeah.
But at 8:15, a unidentified former police officer in Paulden, Arizona, reported seeing around the same time a cluster of reddish orange lights disappear over the horizon. So this all happens in one evening. People have seen. They saw the lights. They were in the sky, flying over Phoenix. Thousands of people reported seeing it. And what they appeared is like this arc shape of 5 different lights and then moved in sort of a pattern.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking at pictures. I don't know if these are real pictures. They must be. But yeah, it looks like balls of light in the sky. Some of them are colored red. Like some pictures are colored red. Some pictures are colored blue. Some are just black and white. Super eerie. Like you can see it's all at night, sort of at dusk, and the town below is lit up, and you just see these like balls of light in the sky, hovering above the city. Were they hovering? They were flying, right? They were moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are witnesses that show a pattern of it moving across this line.
Okay, yeah, this looks spooky.
Yeah,
I'm scared.
And then later that evening at 10 p.m., there was also a scene of a row of lights hovering in the sky, slowly falling. So that's the Phoenix lights.
See, if this were to happen today, people would just be like, "Oh, people got drones out." You know how, unlike for big sporting events, they have like drones in the sky that do cool lights and make images.
Yeah,
like,
it's really cool because actually that's developing. First of all, it can look really cool because you can make like 3D shapes in a really cool way.
Yeah.
But also it's a way to do fireworks that don't, harm wildlife and trigger people's PTSD. So apparently it's a cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thing to fill in for that.
I love that. But yeah, if this happened today, people would just be like, a couple teenagers flying some drones.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, there was a story actually just in Hawaii where people saw some like green lasers being shot into the sky, and they thought it was the military, but probably it's just some people.
Influencers.
Yeah.
Just some influencers trying to get that shot. But yeah, no, this happened in James Cameron's 1997. So
the year that he
I don't think it was. Yeah, I don't think this would have been teenagers with drones.
No, drones had not been invented yet. We didn't have the technology, or did we?
Or did we? Let's continue.
So to just kind of give you guys an idea, because the 1990s were as far back as in the 90s we would think the 60s were. So if today were the 90s, then the 90s would be the 60s. So it's been a while back. It's enough to be like, that not everybody in our audience remembers them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were young enough. You probably barely remember them.
Yeah, I remember the late 90s. Yeah, for sure. Boy Meets World on TV, Zoog Disney, or was that the early 2000s?
I was technically born in the 80s, but I don't remember the 80s at all. Anyways.
The Mighty Ducks film came out when I was born, 1992. That's awesome.
Excellent. Well done. But in the 90s, there was some interesting stuff going on. First of all, there was a huge interest in UFOs and extraterrestrials in the US, but also around the world, because of movies like the one we talked about last week.
Okay.
In the next episode of this podcast, because this is episode 68. In the next episode, right. Episode 69, that came out last week.
Yep. It's confusing. Got to keep up.
That we talked a little bit about sort of big UFO things, as well as shows like the X-Files. And so the idea of UFOs and aliens and stuff like that were definitely on people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, the 1990s was the rapid onset of interconnectivity through the internet, and also just a period of great technological development. So communication was happening really, really fast. And I think that one of the things that we don't really appreciate is that when a new form of technology shows up, there's a period where we don't fully comprehend what the impact is going to be on society, and we are sort of interacting with this platform in a naive fashion, and some weird things can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I did look it up because this seems to be my main job on this show. But yeah, in 1997, Stargate SG-1 was out. Sci-fi, Mm-hmm. I've not seen it, but it sounds like very sci-fi-y.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about this before. South Park came out, and the first episode was about aliens.
Yep.
So there you go.
It's
lots of stuff.
It's definitely in the air.
It's in the air.
Yeah, and there's also a association with UFOs in the American Southwest. Roswell, Area 51, all of those were in New Mexico or Nevada. So in Arizona, very close to both of those states. So
Yes,
and part of the
very
sort of same
true.
thing.
Yes.
Might coincidentally have something to do with commonality in those, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to build anticipation because also it was a part of a sort of classification of UFO sightings, which are called black triangles.
Oh.
And at least
is this like a type of alien spacecraft, like a black triangle?
Basically, because they flew in this triangular formation. So people, one of the reports was that the UFO had a look almost like a carpenter's square, like a
perfect right angle.
Yeah, and so they considered it possibly one of these black triangles, which are UFOs that have shown up in other places. Typically, they're referred to as being triangular, but having a black color, typically seen at night. Described as large, silent, hovering, moving slowly, and pulsing lights. To the point where there's actually a declassified UK Ministry of Defense report that basically the UK version of the UAP report talks about something called Project Condon, which has analysis of black triangle sightings. So it says the government was also interested in it, at least in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
But they came to the conclusion that most of these are probably buoyant plasmas or basically atmospheric events that have to do with gas and electrically, St. Elmo's. Of
course they did.
St. Elmo's fire, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting tidbit. Once we listened to that episode, or once we made that episode about St. Elmo's fire, and you told me to listen to the song, I listened to the song and I was like, that's great. And then I went and watched Into the Spider-Verse, and they play St. Elmo's fire in the movie.
Oh, that's awesome. I forgot they did that.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I now know this.
Great song, great tunes.
I did that thing where Leonardo DiCaprio whistles and points at the TV. Yeah, so they're a known phenomenon, and there have been multiple reports over the years. And they're one of the number one thoughts is that it is actually a theoretical airplane. There's this conspiracy theory that doesn't go into UFO, doesn't go into aliens, but another sort of side thing. And this shows up in a lot of our episodes that a lot of people, there are UFO people who are not alien people, and their conclusion that it is the government testing out a whole bunch of hyper advanced technology that they are just not telling us about.
Gosh, I don't know if I'm one of those people, but if I had to pick between the two, that's probably the camp that I would sit in. Mm-hmm. Is that feels more likely that they're just keeping that people are just testing stuff and keeping it under wraps.
Yeah,
more than aliens. And that's just me.
In the case of the Cold War era UFO sightings, a lot of those were confirmed to just be them testing stealth bombers and stuff like that before they were publicly.
There's precedent. Yeah.
So one of the ones is that there's this theoretical plane called the surveillance plane called the Northrop TR-3A, or otherwise known as the Black Manta. And after I wrote that, I just wrote Aquaman ? Because I know that you're our resident comic book guy, so Black Manta.
He doesn't really fly a plane as far as I know, but
it's more of a water guy.
It would be wild to me if Black Manta and his arch nemesis Aquaman were one of them was the sky, one of them was the sea, and they had to. How would they fight? How would they even meet? Who knows?
The sky goes to war with the sea. That's the name of the arc, right? The sky against the sea or something. I don't know. But yeah, they thought that this was a black project from the U.S. Air Force. It was supposed to be a subsonic stealth plane that had a design that made it look like it was just one big flying wing, which is interesting because I actually have watched some stuff on how now, in an attempt to make more energy efficient airplanes, there are actual the engineers are currently working on trying to make planes that sort of have this shape that look like just one big flying wing, because it can be more aerodynamic and could have you could more easily design them to have to be powered by something that is not fossil fuels, like an electric plane and stuff like that.
It's fun. So I was looking up images of this plane so I can potentially post about it on Twitter or Instagram at Props Aliens.
Save as.
Yep. And I was like, wow, this actually does sort of weirdly look like the mask of Black Manta. Do you think there's any connection there? And I'm like, yeah, they're both doing the animal, right? They're both. That's what. There's no connection between the plane and the comic. It's just they're both named and they look like the animal.
There you go. There's the connection.
That's the connection. It's far less interesting than I thought it was. I was like, whoa, this actually does look like, oh, yeah, I know why. That makes sense.
But as I was kind of saying, there is this idea that that people are trying to develop new airplanes that are just called flying wings, where they don't have fuselage in the same way. Problem is that they're very hard to control. Their stability is pretty tough. But if they can figure it out, you can make like big planes that can like jetliner sort of level planes that don't require nearly as much energy to fly. So you could possibly move to like an electric sort of airplane. The only problem is that people who would have like a lot of the seating inside would not have windows.
Oh, that feels like it would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
I'm in an enclosed void in the sky.
Yeah. And furthermore, they're having a lot of the problem with the flying wings is that they're hard to maneuver. But once they get going, they're very efficient apparently. So that's the thing that's on that. Like, it's not that crazy because that is a thing that people are interested in looking into. And if you look at something like the B2, sorry, the B2 sort of looks like what you would imagine like if you were to imagine an airplane that looks like from the bottom would look like it, you would probably think it was that, right?
Yeah, this is just a big V.
Yeah, the B2, it's the stealth bomber.
It's a big V with a little W in the middle.
But back to the discussion about the Black Manta. So there are some people who think that there's a conspiracy that like during Operation Desert Storm, the government was secretly using Black Mantas to basically direct bombs using laser guided bombs. But there's not that much evidence that they actually exist. And so even like also it being an alien thing, it's more likely that it is something like that than an alien, but it's still, there's not a lot of evidence that something like that actually exists.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
And there's also a recent sort of thought that that some people have thought that a lot of anti-collision lights on Border Patrol drones might actually be some black triangles.
Okay, wait.
In more recent times.
I was going to say, because we had talked about this. We didn't have drones. We didn't have the technology for drones back in James Cameron's 1997.
Yeah, drones really only took off about 10 years later in sort of the War on Terror stuff.
But for more modern sightings of this sort of Phoenix, are they still called Phoenix lights today, even if you don't see them over Phoenix? Yeah, so in more modern sort of sightings, you're saying it could be drones. Yeah. It could just be drones of any kind. It could be Border Patrol drones. It could be influencers.
Not Phoenix lights, the black triangles. Like more recent sightings of black triangles could be these sort of drones.
Gotcha.
So that's a mystery. What is these events? Because it was like, I feel like I'm understating that these were very widely spread. Like there is no this isn't just like this is just a report of some crank. This is like a thing that people actually saw that did some weird stuff. What is this?
Yeah,
What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, again, there are at least from what I can find on Google Images, there seem to be multiple photographs.
It was on the news live.
There's a video. Yeah. So, all right, this might be, as you were saying, even though I don't remember this specifically, I was only a youngin' of 5 years old, but this feels like it would be the most credible UFO sighting with photos and tons of witnesses and news coverage and things like that. So like,
to the point
do
where
we know what it is?
To the point where it was on Ancient Aliens, and to this day it still stands as a cornerstone of ufology. So what it was, I'll just say this is one of those ones where, many times where we're like, we don't know what it is, but there's some explanations that are most likely alien, not aliens. Mm-hmm. This is one where we like almost 100% know what these are.
This episode is sponsored by NordVPN. Go to nordvpn.com/probablynotaliens to get up to 1 extra year of your online security subscription for free as an exclusive gift. So here's the thing. Our podcast has started to get, a little more and more listens recently, and we know that we challenge a lot of conspiracies that certain groups online hold dear, to the point where we've actually started getting people trying to hack into our accounts online. That's not a joke or hyperbole. Attempts have been made by some very angry folks. This happens a lot, obviously, to podcasters and YouTubers like us. We are constantly bombarded by emails that appear to be from YouTube or our bank or social media accounts, but are in fact just an attempt at stealing our passwords. It's called phishing with a PH, if you didn't know, and these phishing attempts are getting better and better every day, so it's not crazy to think that 1 or 2 might eventually sneak in and convince even a seasoned internet veteran like yourself, perhaps. But are Tristan and I scared? No, of course not, silly, because we use NordVPN Threat Protection, which includes a specific feature to warn you about phishing links, as well as features like a blocker for malicious ads and dark web monitoring to alert you if passwords have been leaked. All of these features come with a robust VPN, so you can protect your data and unblock content from streaming services that are only available in certain countries that you might not be in. NordVPN does a lot, is what I'm trying to say. So go to nordvpn.com/probablynotaliens and check it out. The best part is you can try it with no risk. Nord has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it for yourself and decide. NordVPN is privacy-focused. They have 24/7 customer support, and they have apps for every major platform. They got it all, folks. Once again, that's nordvpn.com/probablynotaliens. Get yourself a 2-year plan, and you'll get some additional months for free as an exclusive gift, up to an entire year. Link is in the show notes.
Long story short, they were airplanes.
Alien airplanes?
Kind of. They were from an alien place to Arizona. They were from Maryland. A dark and frozen place.
A dark and frozen planet. The planet of Maryland.
Yeah, the northern cousin of your state of Virginia.
That's me.
So what they were is aircraft that were participating in something called Operation Snowbird. Now, what Operation Snowbird is essentially a Air Force program where during the winter, they'll take Air Force squads that are based in the north, take them down to a place like Phoenix and do training exercises so that they kind of go south for the winter to train, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pilot training program that happened at the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, which is very close. The thing was heading towards Tucson, where they might have been landing or something.
Huh. Interesting.
They were specifically working with the 133rd Airlift Wing that were training to be able to deploy and execute and sustain rapid global mobility around. Basically, they needed to train because fighter pilots need to be able to, at a moment's notice, basically go anywhere in the world and do operations very fast.
Sure.
And so one of the things that people saw, the flying triangle, was a group of A-10 Warthogs, which is a type of airplane. And I included a picture for you to look at because it's a kind of a neat-looking airplane.
I was about to Google it, but it's literally staring me right in the face. Yeah.
So it's A-10 Warthogs. And they were flying in formation following a traffic corridor because, and the lights were what are called visual light rules. So we're going to get a little bit about how airplanes work. So the FAA has rules that basically say where you can or can't fly, and also that airplanes have to have, what are called collision lights that blink.
Oh my God, all this bureaucracy. The sky belongs to everyone, Tristan.
Yeah, this is to keep planes from crashing into each other, so I feel like it works.
All right.
But the FAA's regulations mean that all airplanes have to have a blinking light on it. This is why every time you see an airplane, you'll see a blinking light on it. They're collision lights to keep planes from crashing into each other in the dark. The Air Force doesn't have to follow the same rules, and so their collision. But when they're doing
special,
they don't have to follow these rules. But when they're doing something tricky like a formation, which is anybody who's ever flown a plane, not me, but if you're doing a tight formation of airplanes, it's apparently fairly tricky and hard, and screwing up can be very bad. So
sure,
they needed to turn on some form of light so that they could prevent themselves from crashing into each other. And they did not have the blinking collision lights, so they flew a steady light rather than a light. And so what they saw over Phoenix was these planes flying in the very specific military aircraft corridor that they have designated for this operation, and them flying their steady collision lights in formation, in a sort of triangular formation, as part of their training exercise.
Okay. It's just training exercises. We've been here before. Just a training exercise, everyone.
Yeah. Even
I guess that makes sense.
And while like we've seen lots of different stories of people doing like, eyewitness accounts of the event saying they saw lights. Some people, like an astronomer and a former Air Force pilot who saw the Phoenix lights, was also able to see that they looked like A-10 warthogs flying in formation at high altitude.
Like through a telescope or something?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's something. I mean, did they ever talk about it? Did they ever like confirm this, or was it just like a hush hush? We don't say anything.
Well, another astronomer by the name of Mitch Stanley, also through a telescope, said that they saw what they saw was clearly individual airplanes. And yes, okay. The Air Force did just publicly say that's exactly what it was. Pretty soon after the event too. The second group of lights that we talked about were lights that sort of just hovered in the air. And oftentimes when they're talking about like, obviously, yeah, you could try to write off the first set of lights that we're seeing, the sort of triangle formation. That
Sure, that could be planes. But then you talked about the ones that were falling.
Yeah,
the ones that
hovering.
Had a hovering and then they fell out of the sky or something like that.
Yes,
they fell to the ground.
So
what's that about?
This is very interesting. So what happened is that a different group of planes were doing a different training exercise in the same type of plane for the same program. So it was part of the Snowbird's program. It was another training exercise that was happening, but it was a different group doing it, and it was they were completely unrelated to each other. So what it was another group of warthogs were doing a exercise where they were training with flares. Now, what they were seeing, the way that it was described was a row of lights hovering in the sky or slowly falling that began at 10 p.m. Now, the way that these flares work is that they take long burning, they're called LUU-2B/B illumination flares, and they drop them out of aircrafts. And then what happens is that the flares release a parachute, and the burning of the flare creates almost like a hot air balloon effect. And
so they drop slower.
So they drop very slowly, yeah.
Oh, so the heat from the flare keeps them...
Almost works like a hot air balloon for like a parachute.
Gives them some lift a little bit. That's pretty clever.
Mm-hmm. And then when they saw them like wink out, it was because they had gone over the mountain range of the Sierra Estrella mountain range that's southwest of Phoenix. And as I mentioned, like as people did research on stuff like this, one pilot, a guy by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones, did in 2007 confirm that he was one of the pilots that flew and dropped the flares on that night in question.
Okay. Well, you were saying before that the military did come out and claim the other one. Did they not claim this one?
I think they claimed both of them, but somebody who actually flew the planes confirmed.
10 years later?
10 years, yeah. Well, I guess somebody was probably doing a 10th anniversary
That's true.
story
Honestly,
on it.
The fact that it is 10 years later does make it feel like it is like hey, remember when this happened 10 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the squadron belonged to the Davis-Monthan AFB, and they were on a training exercise. They did some training sorties over the Goldwater Air Force range on the night in question, because as part of the Maryland ANG. And one of the times they found that is somebody actually read a published history of the Maryland ANG that came out in 2000. It is Air. I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to look it up. So, the Maryland Air National Guard.
Gotcha.
So this was
Gotcha.
And so they did say that the 104th Fighter Squadron was responsible for the incident. They published it in their history.
Cool.
The governor, but like the thing is that like it's known, like it's fairly big. Like Fife Symington, who was the governor of Arizona in 1997.
What a name!
Fife Symington.
Yeah,
so Fife Symington actually described the incident as otherworldly.
His name is otherworldly.
Mm-hmm. And this has been confirmed not just through the military, but other sorts of studies as well. Like some people studied the luminosity of the flares and compared them with the LUU-2B/B and found that they were about the same, and also that those illumination flares were used in A-10s at the time. So it all falls well in the range of exactly what people saw in these lights. And you can see that there are lots of still photographs that show this, and you can see that that the reason why they go out suddenly is because they go over the mountain because of sort of like, where they were and their relationship to the mountain.
Right. I also did just want to add to something a couple minutes ago, the idea that the person would come out 10 years later, from 1997 when the event happened to 2007 when that person was like, yes, I was one of the pilots that did that. To lend credibility to the idea that it was marking the 10-year anniversary, the actual event happened on March 13th, 1997, and then the article you said came out in March of 2007. So even down to the month, that feels like why they probably wrote that article. They were just like, hey, remember those flares? Here's what they look like now. Don't you feel old?
My guess is that the journalist was working on a 10th anniversary of the Phoenix Light story and asked the Air Force for comment, and they gave a comment, and that would be them. They admitted it 10 years later.
10 years later, when somebody asked.
Yeah, somebody asked them, like, hey, did you do this? And they're like, yeah, that was us.
Yeah, for sure we did that. 100%.
In the years later, in 2007 and 2008, there were other reports of sort of different Phoenix Lights incidents that also had to do with military flares being dropped by fighter aircraft at Luke Air Force Base. And in one case, they were flares that were attached to helium balloons released by a civilian. So what happened was that on February 6, 2007, some lights were reported by observers and recorded by the local Fox News affiliate. And the military and the FAA pointed out that these were dropped by F-16s, which are sort of the more modern planes that are called Fighting Falcons, at a Luke Air Force Base training exercise. And then in 2008, there was some lights reported over Phoenix by local residents that they reportedly appeared to change from a square to a triangular formation, and a resident reported shortly after that the lights disappeared. After that, 3 jets were seen heading west in the direction of the lights. An official from Luke Air Force Base denied that the U.S. Air Force was in the area at the time. And that was the mystery until the next day, on April 22nd, a resident of Phoenix told a newspaper that the lights were nothing more than his neighbor releasing helium balloons with flares attached, which was then confirmed by a police helicopter. That was in the area at the time. It's a good question. I love this part. The following day, a Phoenix resident who declined to be identified in news reports stated that he had attached flares to helium balloons and released them from his backyard. The question to why doesn't get answered.
I don't know. It was 2008. I was bored.
The economy was collapsing.
I just felt like it. I just wanted to, okay? I had balloons. I had flares. What else was I going to use them for?
It's just a wild, does make me want to cause the London lights by just buying some road flares and tying them to a bunch of helium balloons and just letting it go.
Did anyone? But again, now in modern day, people would be like, just a bunch of influencers with drones. And you're like, nope, just an influencer with some balloons and flares. Old school, baby.
Yeah. So that's the explanation. But here's what I think is interesting, what sticks out about this is that this was very quickly confirmed and established. And there was no, I didn't have to do any digging. It's very well known that this is exactly what the Phoenix Lights were, but it still remains a staple of the UFO subculture. And
this is the thing.
The thing is, we're in a position now where could the government actually say anything that would convince the people who really, really, really want to believe that they're alien spaceships?
That has been on my mind this whole episode, is when you're talking about, because sometimes I try to put myself into the mindset of someone who would genuinely believe some of these theories and things like that. And in my head, there's whatever way that you do it, whether you say actually the government came out the next day and said it was them, immediately alarm bells of yeah, of course they are, because they're covering something up. And then, but if they don't do it, it's and then the government was silent about it and they didn't say anything. And it's well, what do they know that they're hiding? It's just there's no winning. They can't, there's no, you could, either way you go with this, it's going to cause some sort of conspiracy theory.
Yeah, you're almost touching exactly where I define a conspiracy theory, which is that if you have reasoned yourself to a place where there is basically no form of evidence that could convince you otherwise, that you're then in like a sort of epistemological loop.
Yeah.
And there's no getting out of that. That's the point where your belief, your theory has turned into a full-blown conspiracy theory. And at that point, there isn't a rational explanation that's going to take you out of it, right? Because you have reason.
Yeah.
Everything will be put aside in favor of whatever it is you want to believe. And it's confirmation bias and motivated reasoning all over again.
Yeah, and obviously this stuff gets latched onto by the ancient aliens. And even though I don't even know if they mentioned in the episode that it was claimed, that it was like, oh, actually the official explanation was this, like, it just feels like one of those things where they are intentionally trying to spread like a half information, where it's just like, here's this event. What happened? I don't know. But it's like, well, we do know, though, pretty much.
And Ancient Aliens does this a lot.
Yeah, this is nothing new for them. So just more gross stuff.
Yeah, so we can categorize this one under the because sometimes there are ones where it's like, oh yeah, this was like a weird thing and we don't exactly 100% know what it is. This is one that's like confirmed. And yet, and this is where I was actually kind of struggling to be like to come up with the so what of this. But this is one of those cases where I think it shows the main problem of the thinking of a conspiracy theorist or like a true UFO believer, in that there is no amount of evidence that would convince them otherwise. And that's not an approach to do things. I try to approach a lot of things obviously I'm human and I'm, susceptible to all of these biases as well. But I try, and the optimal way to approach something is to try to approach everything thinking, I don't know what this is. I'm going to look at it and take where the evidence leads me. But if you really want the Phoenix Lights to be a starship from another universe or from another planet or whatever, that everything's just gonna fit. And it's one of the downsides of the ways that the sort of silly putty between our ears likes to interpret and connect information. Yeah.
And I sort of touched on this at the start of the show too. It's like the idea, the premise of the show, I feel like we talk about debunking a lot of these theories, but sometimes we do just, and maybe that does paint a little bias on the way that we approach things by like being like, all right, how do we debunk this rather than just how do we look into it and try and gather information and see what's up. So like, admittedly, as you were saying, like we're not immune to any of those biases. But at the same time, the show is literally called It's Probably Not Aliens. And that was a very deliberate choice by you to be like, honestly, there are some things that we don't know and we're not 100% sure. And we might not ever know.
Yeah. But, when we started the podcast, I was like very intrigued by the Oumuamua. I think that there's some more definitive stuff now that has pretty much shown that it was a asteroid, but it was doing some very interesting things that I thought, I feel like that if the time when a UFO sighting actually credibly with multiple forms of data and verifiably can be shown to actually be extraterrestrial spacecraft, there is nobody who's going to be more excited than the two of us.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That would be one of the defining moments of human history, and it would be fascinating. We would learn so much about life and the cosmos and everything to actually see something like that. And it's not like we don't want that to be the case.
Exactly. We have no reason to want there to not be aliens. You know what I mean? It would be terrifying and amazing and genuinely, in the literal sense of the word, awesome to discover that there are intelligent beings out there besides us.
Yeah, it would change everything.
We just don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and these, but I do know that when it actually is aliens, if that ever happens, we might not, because of the limits of the speed of light. Like I said, my theory is that the most likely case that we'll actually see alien life will be something from like the James Webb Telescope, or whatever the sequel to Kepler is, and like they will find an exoplanet that shows definitive biosignatures, and we will know, we will have a pretty good idea that there is life on this planet that is like 300 light years away, and we'll send a message to them. And we'll be like, all right, well, it'll take 300 years to get there. It'll take about 300 years to get back. So, fun. And that'll be about it. But you know, I would love it if we find, because like the thing is, if aliens ships show up too, it means that like somehow the limits of the speed of light and stuff like that are actually overcomable, which would be wild and would change our concept of physics. And this is too much to dig into. But furthermore, all I want to say is, a lot of that will be held back because, kind of like what we saw with the UAP phenomenon, that too many people were afraid to report things because they didn't want to be seen as cranks, and this sort of like dishonest way of approaching UFO phenomenon is always going to hurt that. Ancient Aliens is going to make it harder when it actually is aliens in the future, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. If you want to give us your insights about the Wizard game, no, don't do that. The internet has already too many takes about that. Let us know your thoughts about this episode on Twitter and Instagram at probsnotaliens. I am also on Mastodon. You're on Mastodon too?
Yes, I have a very weird Mastodon. I'm Tristan PEJ at dice.camp.
We should set up our own server. I know it costs money, but we'll figure it out. If we get enough followers and we get a bigger community over there. I'm just at Scott Nicewander at mas.2, mas.tu.
Yeah, because right now, as we're saying this, like Twitter's like, there's like the rumor that Twitter's going to only let you tweet like 4 times a day or something like that. Wild.
Yeah, I was running into limitations just last night. I wanted to follow someone and it said I reached my limit for following. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So anyway, Twitter's burning down right now. But outside of that, where can people find more of your stuff on the internet, Tristan?
I make YouTube videos about history and why understanding the past is important for understanding the present and shaping where we go in the future. And you can find all of that at nebula.tv/stepback or stepbackhistory.com. Scott, if I wanted to watch a video about why a Studio Ghibli movie might crush your dreams and why that's a good thing, where would I need to go?
You can go to my YouTube channel, which is Nerdsync, NERDSYNC. It's also on Nebula, as you said. We're big supporters of Nebula. We're a part of Nebula. It's great. A lot of great content, a lot of good creators, a lot of just us. And it's a good way to support this show. The show's over there. You get an episode a week early. It's awesome. You can also leave reviews of this podcast on Apple Podcasts and other places where you can rate us. It really does help us out. We actually just I know we always say that that podcasts don't have algorithms, but apparently some podcatchers do have algorithms. And so people have been finding the show just because people have been rating it well and listening to it and all that stuff. So thank you so much for people who have been doing that, because we have a lot of people who have no idea that Tristan and I are even YouTubers, but they just found the show and they like it.
Yeah, we're seeing a decent uptick in listens lately, so very good stuff.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. And if you want to keep that trend going and you want to tell your friends about it, share the show, the best website to do that is a very simple one, probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everything. I'm going to add links to Nebula, so you can listen on Nebula as well. We also have a form. We've not done this in a while. On that website, probsnotaliens.com, we have a form where you can submit questions for us to answer. We've not done one of those in a while.
Maybe we should do one of those. Maybe we should do that next, since we're between episodes.
We're sort of between episodes. Maybe episode 70 is Q&A. Ask us questions.
In 2 episodes next week. Because this is episode 68.
Yeah, let's do it. Fantastic. Well, until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. Probably. In Ontario, we say probably, and apparently that's part of our accent.
I like saying it probably, like Prolly, but saying it sort of just like off the cuff, like, probably. It's probably not aliens. I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know.